Olivia Mendez moved through the United Nations compound in Geneva like a shadow, unassuming, efficient, and deliberately forgettable. At 34, she had perfected the art of invisibility. Her dark hair stayed neatly secured in a practical ponytail. Her modest business attire never called attention, and her deep brown eyes rarely engaged directly with anyone. The security personnel called her the tourist behind her back, though she wasn't a tourist at all. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. She was a document specialist hired 6 months ago to handle the endless stream of administrative paperwork that came with coordinating international diplomatic missions. Visa applications, travel authorizations, security clearances, diplomatic immunity requests. Olivia had processed it all with the kind of calm efficiency that made people forget she was even there, which was exactly how she preferred it. Every morning at 0600, Olivia arrived at the compound before anyone else. She'd organize her workspace, prepare her computer systems, and brew coffee strong enough to power through the most tedious diplomatic protocols. The compound buzzed with the controlled chaos of international diplomacy, ambassadors rushing to meetings, security teams coordinating movements, the constant hum of multiple languages filtering through conference rooms. Olivia worked through it all with methodical precision, a slight figure in understated clothing who seemed to anticipate every administrative need before it arose. The diplomats who bothered to notice her at all saw what they expected to see, a quiet administrative assistant who processed their paperwork. Some were polite enough, nodding when they passed in the hallways. Others treated her like office furniture, useful when needed, invisible otherwise. A few, like Security Chief Marco Vasquez, seemed to take pleasure in reminding her of her place in the compound's hierarchy. "Here comes our tourist," Vasquez would say when Olivia appeared to deliver diplomatic credentials, his voice carrying just enough mockery to make nearby security personnel smirk. Probably never seen real danger outside of paper cuts. Olivia never responded to the comments. She'd learned long ago that some battles weren't worth fighting, especially when you had bigger missions to protect. She'd process the paperwork, deliver the credentials, file the reports, and return to her station where she'd spend lunch breaks alone, eating simple meals while reviewing personnel files that crossed her desk. What none of them knew, what none of them could have guessed, was that Olivia Mendez was the daughter of General Eduardo El Cazador Mendez, one of the most legendary covert operatives in Spanish intelligence history. 3 high-profile extractions of war criminals from hostile territories, including the famous silent operation that captured a genocidal Serbian general hiding in Montenegro. Intelligence communities still debated whether some of his reported missions were even physically possible. Olivia wore her father's watch every day, a simple silver timepiece that had timed countless operations across 3 continents. She'd inherited more than just a watch when Eduardo died of a stroke 3 years ago. She'd inherited 20 years of training, investigative instincts that could identify war criminals living under false identities, and a precision that extended far beyond tactical operations into every aspect of her life. But she'd also inherited his burden, the weight of what those skills meant, the responsibility that came with being a hunter disguised as prey. After Eduardo's funeral, Olivia had left her position at the International Criminal Court. 8 years of service as an investigator, dozens of war criminals brought to justice. All of it felt hollow without him there to share it with. She'd tried private investigation for a while, but corporate espionage felt too divorced from justice. Then, the United Nations opportunity emerged. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. International environment, administrative work, but with access to diplomatic movements worldwide. She could serve justice without risking field operations, help without becoming the hunter her father had been. The irony wasn't lost on her that she'd ended up back where she started, surrounded by international officials who saw her as nothing more than a paper pusher. But anonymity had its advantages. Nobody asked probing questions about her background. Nobody expected her to be anything more than competent at basic administrative tasks. Nobody suspected that the quiet woman organizing diplomatic credentials could identify a war criminal by the distinctive scar pattern on his hand, or the unique gait developed from years hiding in mountain terrain. Olivia's modest apartment near Lake Geneva reflected her carefully cultivated ordinary life, international law textbooks, a few photographs of her father in his formal uniform, and locked in a hidden compartment behind her wardrobe, her father's custom Fabrique Nationale 5.7 pistol. She maintained it religiously since his death but never carried it. That part of her life was over, or so she thought. The first sign that her carefully constructed piece was about to shatter came on a Tuesday morning during a high-level diplomatic reception. Ambassador Nikolai Petrov, a celebrated humanitarian from a former Soviet republic, was showing off for a group of admirers. He'd been gesturing dramatically, recounting his efforts to bring peace to a war-torn region, when his sleeve rode up, exposing his forearm. Time seemed to slow as Olivia watched the fabric pull back. Her father's training kicked in automatically: threat assessment, identification markers, probability calculation. The 3-centimeter surgical scar just below his wrist wasn't consistent with Petrov's official medical history, but it was perfectly consistent with an injury sustained by Alexei Sokolov, a notorious militia commander responsible for a 2010 massacre in the Caucasus. The man had disappeared before international tribunals could bring him to justice. Olivia was calculating before her mind fully registered what she'd seen. The distinctive scar pattern, the slight adjustment in his gait when turning left, the unconscious habit of touching his right ear when answering questions, all matched Sokolov's profile. The physical resemblance was obscured by expert cosmetic surgery, but certain markers couldn't be hidden from someone trained to see them. The room continued its diplomatic choreography. Ambassadors laughing, security teams scanning entry points, staff circulating with refreshments. Through it all, Olivia worked with the kind of calm that only came from having done this dozens of times before. She moved through the crowd, collecting empty glasses, straightening place settings, all while cataloging every detail about Ambassador Petrov. "I need the Georgian delegation's security credentials verified immediately," she said, her voice cutting through the administrative bustle without being raised. Nobody moved. They were all checking schedules, reviewing protocol lists. "Immediately," Olivia said, and there was something in her tone, command authority that came from having given orders when justice hung in the balance, that made Deputy Administrator Carlson scramble for the verification codes. Olivia worked steadily, cross-referenced the documentation, confirmed travel patterns, and secured digital access to facial recognition databases that would require clearance far above her pay grade. Her hands never trembled, her breathing never quickened, her focus never wavered. "Are you with security?" Carlson asked, his voice tight with confusion, but no longer dismissive. "No," Olivia replied, checking the authentication protocols. "Just thorough." The verification results arrived 27 minutes later. Olivia had been counting automatically, another habit from her investigator days. The facial recognition software had flagged multiple inconsistencies in Petrov's documentation, asking if she wanted to forward the findings to Interpol. Olivia hesitated, knowing what this would mean: the end of her quiet administrative life, the beginning of a hunt she'd sworn she'd left behind. After the reception, the diplomatic halls buzzed with conversation about the extra security measures, about Olivia's sudden interest in the Georgian delegation, about the way she'd accessed systems beyond her clearance level. But by the next day, most had forgotten. It was easier to go back to seeing her as the tourist than to confront the possibility that they'd been wrong about her. Most, but not all. Security Chief Vasquez started watching her more closely, and his comments took on a sharper edge. "Think you're hot stuff because you can check a security protocol?" he'd say when she passed in the hallway. "Bet you learned that from watching spy movies." Olivia endured it all, focused on her work, tried to maintain her invisibility, but something had shifted that day. She'd revealed a crack in her carefully constructed facade, and cracks had a way of widening under pressure. As she sat alone in her administrative office that evening, checking her father's watch and thinking about what she'd discovered, Olivia couldn't shake the feeling that her peaceful anonymity was living on borrowed time. She was right. The harassment started small. Credential know-it-all became Vasquez's favorite name for Olivia, delivered with just enough venom to make nearby staff uncomfortable, but not enough to be officially inappropriate. He'd use it when requesting documentation, when passing in the hallway, whenever he wanted to remind her and everyone else that he didn't appreciate administrative staff interfering with security matters. Olivia tried to ignore it, but Vasquez had a talent for timing. He'd make his comments when she was helping diplomats with urgent documentation, turning moments of professional competence into something that felt embarrassing, presumptuous. Other staff members began to notice the tension, and Olivia could feel the shift in how they looked at her. "Must be nice," Vasquez said one afternoon as Olivia finished processing an ambassador's diplomatic immunity extension. "Having all the answers when you've never faced real danger." The ambassador glanced between them, sensing the undercurrent but not understanding it. Olivia handed him his credentials and procedural instructions without responding to Vasquez's comment. But something cold settled in her chest. If only he knew. The breaking point came during a particularly high-profile week, when 3 different diplomatic missions resulted in multiple security escalations. Olivia had been working 16-hour days, barely stopping to eat, handling everything from emergency visa authorizations to credentials for a potential hostage negotiator being deployed to a conflict zone. She was exhausted but professional, competent but invisible, exactly what she trained herself to be. On Friday evening, as she was organizing the weekend's diplomatic movement schedules, Director Larson stopped by her administrative station. Olivia had rarely interacted with the compound's executive director, but she'd observed him enough to know he was fair-minded and respected by his staff. "Ms. Mendez," he said, and Olivia looked up from her schedule matrix. "I wanted to thank you personally for your work this week. The administrative reports I've been reading are exemplary: perfect protocol adherence, proper security verification sequencing, no procedural violations. The security team at the Syrian peace talks specifically mentioned your advanced preparation of diplomatic credentials, said it probably prevented a serious diplomatic incident." Olivia felt a flutter of something she hadn't experienced in months: professional pride. "Thank you, sir. I'm just doing my job." "You're doing it exceptionally well," Larson replied. "I'd like to discuss expanding your role here. Maybe additional clearance, more responsibility. You clearly have the skills for it." After Larson left, Olivia allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. Maybe her careful competence was paying off. Maybe she could build a career here, find stability, honor her father's memory through international service rather than hunting criminals. The moment lasted exactly until Monday morning, when she discovered what Vasquez had been up to. "Heard you got a little praise from the director," Vasquez said, cornering her in the records room. "Must have been a slow week for him to notice the help." Olivia tried to step around him, but Vasquez blocked her path. "You know what I think? I think you're getting a little too comfortable here, starting to forget your place." "I'm just doing my job, Chief Vasquez. Your job is to process paperwork and handle credentials. Your job is not to access security protocols, not to override verification systems, and definitely not to make the rest of us look bad with your little performance last week." Olivia met his eyes for the first time in months. "Performance? All that dramatic protocol management like you're some kind of intelligence officer instead of just another administrative assistant who learned basic document processing." Vasquez stepped closer, using his height to intimidate. "I've been asking around about you, Ms. Mendez. Funny thing, nobody seems to know much about your background. No diplomatic service, no intelligence agency connections, just some mysterious, international experience. You keep vague." Olivia's hands went still on the diplomatic portfolio she'd been organizing. Vasquez had been investigating her background. How much had he found? How much was there to find? "Makes a guy wonder," Vasquez continued. "What you're hiding, what you're running from. Because people don't just show up at United Nations compounds with convenient protocol skills and no professional trail. My credentials were verified when I was hired. Basic credentials, sure. But I'm talking about the real story, the one you don't want to tell." Vasquez smiled, and it wasn't pleasant. "Don't worry, I'll figure it out. And when I do, we'll see how impressed the director is with his star administrator." After Vasquez left, Olivia stood alone in the records room, her hands shaking for the first time since the Petrov incident. She'd been so careful, so thorough in creating her new identity. Her ICC records were classified. Her father's connection buried in confidential Spanish intelligence files. It required high-level clearance to access, but Vasquez was persistent, and if he kept digging. That night, Olivia sat in her apartment, her father's pistol case open for the first time in months. She wasn't planning anything, just reconnecting with the part of herself she'd been trying to forget. The 5-7 was exactly as she'd left it, perfectly maintained, with the custom modifications Eduardo had made over years of covert operations. A tool designed for one purpose: bringing justice to those who believed they were beyond its reach. Olivia had inherited her father's precision, but she'd also inherited his wisdom. Eduardo had taught her that the most dangerous hunter was the one your target didn't see coming. For 3 years, she'd been the ultimate hidden operative, a trained international investigator disguised as an administrative assistant. But hiding had its costs. Vasquez's investigation, his increasing hostility, the way other staff members were starting to look at her with suspicion rather than respect, it was all building towards something Olivia couldn't control from her position of artificial weakness. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Enjoyed our conversation today. Looking forward to learning more about your background. Sleep tight, tourist." Vasquez had her personal phone number. He was escalating beyond workplace harassment into something more personal, more threatening. Olivia stared at the message, then at her father's pistol, then at the photo on her bookshelf showing Eduardo in his formal intelligence service uniform, rows of commendations including the Medal of Distinguished Service he'd earned for bringing the Montenegrin operation to justice. "¿Qué harías tú, papá?" she whispered to the empty apartment. "What would you do, Dad?" The answer came to her in Eduardo's voice, clear as if he were sitting beside her. "A veces, mi niña, la mejor manera de terminar una cacería es mostrarles exactamente a quien están persiguiendo." "Sometimes, my child, the best way to end a hunt is to show them exactly who they're hunting." Olivia closed the pistol case and made her decision. She'd given peace a chance, tried to honor her father's memory through administrative service rather than pursuing justice. But Vasquez had made it clear that peace wasn't an option. He wanted to know who she really was. Maybe it was time to show him. Vasquez's campaign against Olivia intensified over the next 2 weeks. He'd found allies among the junior security officers, personnel who resented civilian administrators in general, and competent women in particular. They'd make comments about playing diplomat and fake credentials, just loud enough for Olivia to hear. They'd question her protocol decisions, second-guess her security clearance assessments, and create an atmosphere of doubt around everything she did. Olivia endured it all with the same quiet professionalism she'd maintained for months. But inside, she was making preparations. She began documenting everything: times, dates, witnesses, exact quotes. Her father had taught her that intelligence gathering was as important as investigative skill, and Vasquez was giving her plenty of ammunition. The harassment took a more serious turn when Olivia arrived at work one morning to find her administrative station compromised. Files rearranged, computer accessed, her carefully organized diplomatic schedules altered in subtle ways that would have caused verification problems if she hadn't caught them. A note was taped to her monitor. "Tal vez deberías limitarte a lo que sabes. Un amigo. Maybe you should stick to what you know. A friend." Olivia photographed everything before restoring order, adding the images to the file she was building. Vasquez had escalated to sabotage, probably thinking he could intimidate her into quitting. He had no idea he was provoking an investigator who'd been trained by the best. That afternoon, Deputy Director Fernandez stopped by Olivia's station. Fernandez was old-school diplomatic service, a 25-year veteran who'd earned her position in difficult postings across 3 continents. She was respected throughout the compound, and her opinion carried weight with Director Larson. "Ms. Mendez," Fernandez said, her voice carefully neutral. "I wanted to ask you about something. I've been hearing rumors, questions about your qualifications, your background. Wanted to give you a chance to address them directly." Olivia looked up from her diplomatic schedule, meeting Fernandez's eyes. "What kind of questions?" "The kind that suggest maybe you're not who you say you are. Maybe you're hiding something that could be relevant to your position here." Fernandez sat down, her expression serious. "I've been watching you work for months. Your protocol skills are solid, your attention to detail is excellent, and you handle pressure better than most field operatives I've known. But Chief Vasquez has raised some concerns about your credentials, your background checks. What specifically is he claiming?" He's suggesting that your paperwork might be incomplete, that there are gaps in your history that weren't properly investigated during your hiring process. Fernandez leaned forward. He's also suggesting that Director Larson might be interested in reviewing your file more carefully. Olivia felt something cold settle in her stomach. Vasquez was going after her job now, trying to create enough doubt to force a deeper background investigation. If Director Larson ordered a comprehensive review, her classified ICC records might be opened. Her carefully constructed new identity would crumble. Chief Vasquez seems to have a lot of opinions about my qualifications, Olivia said carefully. He does, and he's been sharing them with anyone who'll listen. Fernandez studied her face. The thing is, I've been around long enough to recognize certain qualities in people. The way you move, the way you assess situations, the way you stay calm under pressure. You remind me of people I've served with in diplomatic protection details. Olivia's hands went still on her clipboard. Fernandez was fishing, but she was also observant. How much had she noticed? How much had she guessed? I think, Fernandez continued, that whatever Vasquez thinks he's uncovered, he might not understand the full picture. And I think he might be making a mistake by pushing this issue. What are you saying, Deputy Director? I'm saying that if you have a story to tell, it might be better to tell it on your own terms rather than let Vasquez control the narrative. Fernandez stood up. I'm saying that if Vasquez is hunting something he doesn't understand, he might find more than he bargained for. After Fernandez left, Olivia sat alone at her station, staring at her father's watch. 15:47 hours. In 30 minutes, the afternoon diplomatic reception would begin, and she'd be back to handling the endless stream of credential verifications that made up her official duties. But underneath the routine, a decision was being forced. Vasquez wanted to know who she really was. Fine, but he was about to learn that some secrets were kept for everyone's protection, not just hers. That evening, Olivia made a phone call to a number she hadn't used in 3 years. It was answered on the second ring. This is Director Navarro. Special Investigations. Sir, this is Olivia, she caught herself. This is Senior Investigator Mendez. ICC identification 28,479,563,421. I need to speak with you about my sealed case records. A pause. Mendez, I remember you. El Cazador's daughter. Your father was a hell of an operative. Yes, sir. I have a situation that might require my records to be clarified. What kind of situation? Olivia explained about Vasquez, about his investigation, about the escalating harassment. Navarro listened without interrupting, occasionally asking for clarification on dates and specifics. So you're asking me to unseal your records? I'm asking you to be ready to unseal them if it becomes necessary. Someone's digging into my background, and I'd rather control how the information comes out than let them stumble onto it accidentally. Understood. I'll make sure your file is ready for immediate release on your authorization. And Mendez, your father would be proud of how you've handled this so far, but if push comes to shove, don't let them forget who trained you. Olivia hung up the phone and looked at her father's pistol case. She'd spent 3 years running from who she was, trying to honor Eduardo's memory through administrative work instead of bringing criminals to justice. But Vasquez had made it clear that running wasn't an option anymore. Time to stop being the tourist and remind everyone why Eduardo Mendez had been called El Cazador. The hunt was about to become a confrontation, and Olivia had been trained by the best investigators Spanish intelligence had ever produced. Vasquez had no idea what he'd awakened. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The mandatory security clearance review came with 1 week's notice. Every compound personnel, diplomatic staff, security, and civilian administrators were required to demonstrate valid credentials and undergo background verification. Olivia read the memo twice, understanding immediately that this wasn't routine scheduling. Vasquez had arranged this, probably convinced Director Larson that support staff needed evaluation after some manufactured concern about security breaches. Going to be interesting. She heard Vasquez tell another officer as she passed in the hallway. See who's been telling the truth about their backgrounds. Olivia spent the week preparing, but not in the way Vasquez expected. She researched the compound's security protocols, studied the verification procedures, and planned her approach carefully. Her father had taught her that every operation was won or lost in the preparation phase. This wouldn't be a demonstration of her administrative skills. It would be a revelation. The night before the verification, Olivia sat in her apartment with her father's investigation files spread across her kitchen table. She reviewed each document with the methodical precision Eduardo had drilled into her, muscle memory taking over as her mind focused on the coming day. She wasn't planning to confront Vasquez directly. That would stay as a last resort. But the ritual connected her to Eduardo's teachings, to the legacy she'd been trying to escape. Justicia con precision, she whispered, repeating one of her father's favorite phrases. Justice with precision. Tomorrow would require both. Verification day dawned cold and gray with tension that seemed to permeate the entire compound. Olivia arrived early before the other administrative staff and found Deputy Director Fernandez reviewing security protocols. "Morning, Ms. Mendez," Fernandez said, not looking up from the file she was inspecting. "Ready for today?" "As ready as I can be." Fernandez held up an old ICC investigator badge, the same type Olivia had carried, though this one was clearly from years earlier. "Thought you might be interested in this. Found it in our historical archives. Figured I'd bring it out, see if anyone recognized the significance." Olivia studied the badge, noting the authentication features, the authorization levels, the way Fernandez held it as if testing her reaction. "You planning to use that today?" "Thought I might let someone else have a try, see what they can do with a real international justice instrument." Fernandez met her eyes. "Any volunteers?" Olivia understood. Fernandez had figured out at least part of her background, and she was offering her a choice. She could continue hiding behind her administrative assistant persona, or she could step into the light and show everyone exactly who Olivia Mendez really was. "I'll think about it," she said. The verification began at 0800 with basic credential authentication. Olivia performed adequately, good enough to pass, not good enough to stand out. She watched Vasquez working his way through the administrative staff, making comments about civilian assistants playing at security clearance loud enough for everyone to hear. "Your turn, credential know-it-all," Vasquez called when Olivia approached the verification station. "Let's see what those document skills taught you about real security protocols." Several officers gathered to watch, expecting entertainment. Olivia took her position, presented her administrative credentials, and underwent the verification process. Her documentation was flawless, her background check parameters precisely within acceptable limits. Competent, but unremarkable. "Not bad for a beginner," Vasquez said with mock praise. "Maybe you should stick to that instead of trying to access high-level security systems." The digital verification was next. Most of the administrative staff struggled with the authentication systems, managing to navigate the basic protocols, but becoming confused with the more complex security verifications. Olivia completed her verification with the same calculated mediocrity she'd used with the credentials. Good enough to pass, forgettable enough to maintain her cover. Then Fernandez approached with the ICC badge. "This is a specialized credential," Fernandez announced to the group. "International Criminal Court Investigator Authorization requires significant expertise to authenticate properly. I thought we'd have a little demonstration. Show everyone what real verification protocols look like." Vasquez stepped forward immediately. "I'll give it a try, Deputy Director. I've got international security experience." Fernandez handed him the badge. Vasquez took his time examining it, checking the watermarks, talking about his border security work in Eastern Europe. He ran 3 different authentication tests, managing to confirm the basic parameters, but missing the subtle secondary verification markers that would have validated its operational status. "Not bad," Fernandez said diplomatically. "Anyone else want to try?" Several officers volunteered with similar results. The ICC badge was clearly beyond their verification expertise, and the complex authentication protocols weren't helping. "How about you, Ms. Mendez?" Fernandez called out, her voice carrying across the verification area. "Want to give it a shot?" The group turned to look at her, and Olivia saw the mixture of expressions, curiosity, skepticism, and from Vasquez, barely concealed glee at the opportunity to watch her fail publicly. "I don't think," Olivia started. "Come on." Vasquez interrupted. "Fair's fair. Everyone gets a turn." Olivia approached the badge, her movements suddenly different. The careful invisibility fell away, replaced by the fluid precision of someone who'd done this thousands of times. She picked up the ICC badge, feeling its weight, its authentication features, the familiar comfort of an investigative instrument in trained hands. The joking stopped. Something about her posture, her grip, the way she naturally fell into verification position commanded attention. Olivia adjusted the authentication device with quick, professional movements, her body settling into a verification sequence that looked like she'd been born conducting it. She controlled her movements, found her natural verification rhythm, and aligned the authentication markers. Level 4, Verification Access, Tertiary Confirmation Protocols, Embedded Validation Chips. She made her assessments automatically, muscle memory from years of training taking over. The first authentication sequence completed with a confirmation tone. Through the security monitor, Fernandez called out the result. Primary validation confirmed. Olivia continued the sequence, adjusted for the specialized ICC protocols, and proceeded to the secondary authentication. Secondary validation confirmed. One more sequence, this time aimed at the highest level verification markers that only ICC investigators would know to check. The final confirmation appeared exactly where she'd expected. Full validation confirmed, Fernandez announced, her voice carrying a note of respect that made everyone in the verification area pay attention. Olivia stood up, handed the badge back to Fernandez, and started to walk away. The spell was broken, conversations resuming, but she could feel the weight of stares following her. "Wait a minute," Vasquez called out, his voice sharp with suspicion. "That was luck. Has to be." Olivia turned back, meeting his eyes for the first time in weeks. "Excuse me?" "Nobody authenticates ICC credentials like that without extensive training. Nobody." Vasquez's face was flushed, angry. "I want to know where you learned to do that. I want to know who you really are." The verification area fell silent. Olivia looked at the faces surrounding her, officers who'd dismissed her for months, administrative staff who'd watched her endure Vasquez's harassment, Fernandez, who'd been waiting for this moment. "You want to know who I am?" Olivia said quietly. "Ask Deputy Director Fernandez. She figured it out weeks ago." Fernandez stepped forward, the ICC badge still in her hands. "Ladies and gentlemen, meet Olivia Mendez, daughter of General Eduardo El Cazador Mendez, three-time recipient of the Medal of Distinguished Service and the most decorated covert operative in Spanish intelligence history." The silence stretched long enough to hear the ventilation system across the empty verification area. "She's also," Fernandez continued, "a former senior investigator for the International Criminal Court, 2 deployments tracking war criminals across Eastern Europe, and trained in covert investigation by the man who held the record for the most successful war criminal extractions in Spanish intelligence history." Vasquez's face went white. "That's impossible." "Her background check. Her records are sealed," Fernandez said. "Classified clearance required, but I've seen enough international investigators to recognize the real thing when I see it." Quote, "Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us." Now back to the story. Olivia looked around the circle of faces, seeing the shift from skepticism to recognition to something approaching awe. She'd spent months hiding, trying to escape her father's legacy. But Vasquez had forced her hand. "You wanted to know who I am," Olivia said, her voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who'd commanded respect in life-or-death situations. "Now you know." She walked away from the verification area, leaving behind the tourist persona she'd carefully constructed and embracing, for the first time in 3 years, exactly who Olivia Mendez really was. The confrontation was over. She'd won without revealing the full extent of her capabilities, exactly as her father had taught her. But the real mission was just beginning. Word spread through the UN compound like wildfire. By evening, everyone knew that the quiet administrative assistant who'd been processing their diplomatic credentials was actually senior investigator Olivia Mendez, daughter of the legendary El Cazador, trained by the most respected covert operative in Spanish intelligence history. Olivia found herself in an impossible position. The anonymity she'd carefully constructed was gone, but the attention that replaced it was almost worse. Officers who'd ignored her for months now sought her out, wanting to hear stories about her father, asking for investigation tips, treating her with a reverence that made her deeply uncomfortable. Vasquez had disappeared after the verification demonstration, but Olivia knew he wasn't finished. Men like him didn't accept defeat gracefully, especially when that defeat was as public and humiliating as what had happened at the verification area. She was right to be concerned. Director Larson requested a meeting the next morning. Olivia reported to his office at 0800, unsure whether she was about to be commended or terminated. Larson was behind his desk, her personnel file open in front of him, his expression unreadable. "Sit down, Ms. Mendez," Larson said. "Or should I say Senior Investigator Mendez?" "Olivia is fine, sir. I'm a civilian now." "Are you?" Larson leaned back in his chair. "Because according to the files I've been reading since yesterday, you're one of the most qualified international investigators to ever serve in this compound. And you've been hiding it for 6 months. Olivia met his gaze steadily. "I wasn't hiding anything, sir. I was trying to start over. By working as an administrative assistant instead of using your actual qualifications, by serving in a way that didn't require you to pursue justice." Larson studied her for a long moment. "Your father's death?" "Yes, sir. After he died, I couldn't. I needed to find a different way to serve." "And Chief Vasquez's harassment?" Olivia felt a flash of surprise. "You know about that?" "I know about all of it. The comments, the intimidation, the investigation into your background. Deputy Director Fernandez has been keeping me informed." Larson closed her file. "The question is, what do we do about it now?" "Sir, Vasquez violated several regulations regarding workplace harassment. He also exceeded his authority by conducting an unauthorized investigation into a civilian administrator's background. Those are serious charges." Olivia considered her options. She could push for formal charges against Vasquez, probably get him demoted or transferred, but that would mean more attention, more questions, more disruption to the careful balance she'd been trying to maintain. "I don't want to make this bigger than it needs to be," she said finally. "Too late for that," Larson replied. "Word is already spreading beyond this compound. I've had 3 different international justice organizations call, asking about you. Apparently, your reputation precedes you." Olivia's heart sank. The international justice community was a small world, and skilled investigators were always in demand. If word got out about her real capabilities, the job offers would start coming, and with them, pressure to return to criminal investigation, to use her father's training for its intended purpose. "I'm not interested in returning to active investigation," she said. "I understand, but I am interested in utilizing your skills here." Larson leaned forward. "I'm offering you a promotion, Senior Diplomatic Security Officer, Training Coordinator for Verification Protocols, Consultant for our International Justice Liaison Office, full diplomatic benefits, significant pay increase, and the respect you should have been receiving all along." It was everything Olivia had been afraid of: official recognition, expanded responsibilities, a return to the world she'd been trying to escape. But it was also an opportunity to serve on her own terms, to use her father's training for international cooperation rather than pursuing criminals. "What about Vasquez?" "Vasquez is being transferred. Effective immediately. His behavior was unacceptable, and frankly, he became a liability the moment he decided to target you." Olivia felt a complex mix of emotions: relief, vindication, and something that might have been disappointment. She'd been prepared for a confrontation, armed with documentation and testimony and righteous anger. But Larson had already won the battle for her, handled the politics while she'd been focused on the personal conflict. "There's one more thing," Larson continued. "I want you to know that your father's reputation opened doors for this conversation, but your own performance over the past 6 months is what convinced me you deserve this position. The diplomatic protocols, the way you handled the Petrov identification, your response to every administrative challenge that's come through those doors. That's all you, not your father's legacy." After the meeting, Olivia walked through the compound with mixed feelings. Security personnel nodded respectfully as she passed, some stopping to introduce themselves properly for the first time. The tourist was gone, replaced by someone who commanded automatic respect and authority. But with that recognition came responsibility. At lunch, 3 different officers approached her with questions about verification protocols. 2 diplomatic security agents asked for advice about threat assessment. A young administrative assistant wanted to know if she thought he had what it took to be an international investigator. Olivia answered their questions, shared what knowledge she could, but inside she felt the weight of her father's legacy settling on her shoulders. Eduardo had carried the burden of being seen as a hunter first, a person second. Now she understood what that felt like. That evening, she sat in her apartment with her father's case files across her lap, no longer hidden in drawers, but displayed where she could see them. She'd reviewed them earlier, a ritual that felt different now, not like preserving a memory, but like preparing for a mission she might need to undertake again. Her phone rang. Deputy Director Fernandez. "Olivia, I wanted to check on you. Big day." "Yeah, still processing it all. You did good today at the verification. I mean, your father would have been proud." Olivia smiled, the first genuine smile she'd felt in weeks. "Thanks, Fernandez. That means a lot. You know, I worked with your father once, briefly in Serbia. He identified a war criminal who had our entire team fooled. One verification, using nothing but visual markers from 50 meters away through a crowded diplomatic reception. The Montenegro extraction? Different one. Point is, I know what kind of man your father was. Precise, professional, but also deeply committed to justice. He never took an assignment unless it was necessary, and he never celebrated afterward. That's what made him special. Not just the skill, but the responsibility he felt for it." Olivia understood what Fernandez was telling her. "You think I'm ready for this? I think you've been ready for this since the day you walked in here. You just needed to remember who you are." After hanging up, Olivia opened her father's letter, the one Director Larson had given her earlier that day, the one she'd read dozens of times but never truly absorbed. "If you're reading this, you've shown them who you really are. I'm proud of you. Not for the investigations, but for the reasons you choose to investigate. Justicia con precision, compassion con fuerza. That's what I taught you. That's who you are." For the first time since Eduardo's death, Olivia felt like she understood what he'd been trying to tell her. It wasn't about hiding from her abilities or embracing them completely. It was about using them responsibly, with purpose, for the right reasons. She was ready to stop running from her father's legacy and start building her own. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Olivia's new position as Senior Diplomatic Security Officer came with an office, a staff of 6 analysts, and responsibilities that extended far beyond processing diplomatic credentials. She was tasked with developing threat assessment protocols, training security teams in verification techniques, and consulting on the compound's international justice liaison operations. It should have felt like victory, but Olivia discovered that recognition brought its own challenges. The job offers started within a week: special tribunals, international police organizations, government intelligence agencies. Everyone wanted Eduardo Mendez's daughter on their team. Olivia declined them all, but the attention was relentless. Her phone rang constantly with recruiters who'd somehow obtained her personal number. More troubling were the diplomats who now saw her as a resource rather than a person. They'd find excuses to visit her office, hoping to get intelligence on regions they were traveling to or insight into security threats they might face. Some were respectful, others presumptuous, all of them reducing her to her father's legacy rather than seeing her own accomplishments. It's like being a human database. Olivia confided to Fernandez during one of their informal mentoring sessions. Everyone wants access to the legendary investigator's daughter's knowledge. Give it time, Fernandez advised. The novelty will wear off. Meanwhile, focus on the work. Show them what you can do as Olivia Mendez, not just as Eduardo's daughter. Olivia threw herself into her new responsibilities with the same methodical precision she'd applied to everything else. She redesigned the security verification protocols for maximum efficiency, implemented new threat assessment procedures based on her ICC experience, and began training the compound security officers in advanced techniques she'd learned in Eastern Europe. The results were immediate and impressive. Security breaches declined, diplomatic protection improved, and the security team began operating with a level of coordination that impressed even Director Larson. Olivia was building something worthwhile, creating a legacy based on international cooperation rather than criminal pursuit. But she hadn't forgotten about Ambassador Petrov. Her identification of the man as Alexei Sokolov had been pushed aside during the Vasquez situation. But the war criminal was still operating freely, still using his false diplomatic identity to move through international circles. Olivia knew she needed to address this, but carefully, without triggering the kind of manhunt that had defined her earlier career. She compiled a dossier, photographs comparing Sokolov's distinctive features with Petrov's carefully altered appearance, analysis of speech patterns from recorded diplomatic sessions, verification of the surgical alterations he'd undergone to change his appearance. It was methodical, thorough, and damning. Olivia shared her findings with Director Larson and Deputy Director Fernandez in a closed-door meeting, explaining how she'd identified Sokolov and what his presence meant for the diplomatic community. "This is extraordinary work," Larson said, reviewing the dossier. "The facial recognition algorithms missed him entirely, but you spotted him from a surgical scar." "It's what I was trained to do," Olivia replied. "The question is, what do we do with this information?" Larson exchanged glances with Fernandez. Standard protocol would be to alert Interpol, have him arrested at the next diplomatic function, and create an international incident that could disrupt peace talks in 3 regions, Olivia noted. His country would claim diplomatic immunity, deny his identity, accuse us of fabricating evidence. The diplomatic fallout could be severe. "What do you suggest?" Fernandez asked. Olivia considered her options, drawing on her father's teachings about the delicate balance between justice and international stability. "We need to extract him quietly. Create a situation where he's separated from his diplomatic protection. Document his true identity beyond question, and then present the evidence to his government privately before any public action is taken." "That's not standard procedure," Larson said carefully. "No, sir. But neither is having a war criminal posing as a peace negotiator." Larson studied her for a long moment. "This is why we needed you, Olivia. Not just for your verification skills, but for your perspective. I'll authorize the operation, but with conditions. It must be absolutely discreet, with minimal personnel involved, and there must be no possibility of it being traced back to this compound." "I understand, sir. I'll need a small team, specific equipment, and access to certain restricted areas during the next diplomatic reception. You'll have whatever you need." "But Olivia," Larson's expression was serious. "This isn't the ICC. We can't afford even the appearance of overstepping diplomatic boundaries." "Understood, sir. Precision and discretion. It's how my father would have handled it." Quote, "Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us." Now back to the story. Over the next 3 weeks, Olivia prepared methodically for the extraction. She selected her team carefully: 2 security analysts with intelligence backgrounds, a technical specialist who could defeat Sokolov's digital protections, and Deputy Director Fernandez to provide high-level authorization if needed. She studied Sokolov's patterns, identified his vulnerabilities, and planned each step of the operation with her father's precision. The diplomatic reception would be held at the Palais des Nations, with representatives from 27 countries attending. Ambassador Petrov would be there, continuing his charade as a humanitarian concerned with peace. Olivia's team would be there too, watching and waiting for the perfect moment. The night of the reception, Olivia dressed not as a security officer or an investigator, but as a diplomatic aide, invisible once again, but this time by choice. She wore an earpiece connecting her to her team, who were positioned strategically throughout the reception hall. "Target has arrived," came the first report. "Moving through the south entrance with 2 security personnel." "Understood," Olivia replied. "Maintain visual contact, but keep your distance." "Wait for my signal." She moved through the reception with practiced ease, cataloging faces, assessing security positions, noting which diplomats were genuinely engaged in peace negotiations and which were merely performing for political advantage. All the while, she kept Sokolov in her peripheral vision, watching for the opportunity they needed. It came 90 minutes into the reception, Sokolov excused himself from a conversation with the French ambassador and headed toward a private hallway, likely heading for the restrooms. One security officer followed at a discreet distance, the other remained with Sokolov's belongings. "He's moving to the restricted corridor," Olivia said quietly. "Fernandez, are you in position?" "Ready," came the response. "Technical systems are prepared." Olivia moved smoothly through the crowd, following Sokolov at a careful distance. As he entered the private hallway, she gave the signal. "Execute now." The technical specialist activated a prearranged security protocol that sealed the hallway doors for what would appear to be a routine security verification. Sokolov's remaining security officer found himself temporarily detained by compound security conducting, quote, "credential verification." Olivia entered the hallway just as Fernandez appeared from the opposite end. Sokolov was alone in the middle, looking confused by the sealed doors. "Good evening, Alexei," Olivia said quietly in Russian. Sokolov froze, then turned slowly to face her. His features showed momentary shock before settling into diplomatic smoothness. "I believe you're mistaken. My name is Nikolai Petrov. I am the ambassador from the Republic of Georgia. Yes, I know your cover story very well," Olivia continued in Russian. "Just as I know about the distinctive surgical scar on your right wrist from when you were injured fleeing Chechnya in 2010. The same injury documented in your militia medical records, Alexei Sokolov." Sokolov's expression hardened. "Who are you?" "Someone who recognizes you. Someone who knows exactly what you did in the Caucasus." Sokolov glanced at both ends of the hallway, calculating his options. "Whatever you think you know, you have no authority here. I have diplomatic immunity." "Nikolai Petrov has diplomatic immunity," Fernandez said, approaching from the other end of the hallway. "But we have evidence that Nikolai Petrov doesn't exist. He's a fabricated identity created through forged documentation and surgical alteration. This is absurd." "My government will—" "Your government doesn't know who you really are," Olivia interrupted. "They believe they appointed a legitimate diplomat. They'll be quite interested to learn they've been harboring a war criminal wanted by the International Criminal Court." Olivia held up a digital tablet displaying side-by-side images, Sokolov before his disappearance, and Petrov with digital enhancements revealing the underlying bone structure. "Facial reconstruction can change your appearance, but it can't alter the underlying architecture of your skull. The match is conclusive." Sokolov's composure cracked for a moment, revealing the cold calculation beneath the diplomatic veneer. "What do you want?" "Justice," Olivia said simply. "But not at the expense of the peace process your country is currently engaged in." Fernandez stepped forward. "We're offering you a choice, Mr. Sokolov. Option 1. We release this evidence publicly. Your government denies everything. International relations deteriorate. The peace talks collapse, and eventually you're arrested anyway when the evidence becomes irrefutable. Option 2? Sokolov asked, his voice tight with controlled anger. "You come with us quietly now," Olivia explained. "We document your identity thoroughly, present the evidence to your government privately, and allow them to save face by discovering your deception themselves. They disavow you, hand you over to the proper authorities, and the peace process continues without disruption. Why would I agree to that?" "Because you're a pragmatist, Alexei," Olivia said. "You've always chosen survival. It's how you evaded capture for 12 years. It's how you constructed this elaborate identity. And right now, cooperation is your best chance for survival." Sokolov looked between them, weighing his options. "And if I refuse?" "Those doors will open in exactly 45 seconds, Fernandez said. "You'll return to the reception, and tomorrow morning your photograph and true identity will be on the front page of every major newspaper in the world." Olivia watched the calculations running behind Sokolov's eyes, the same cold arithmetic that had allowed him to order the deaths of civilians and then reinvent himself as a diplomat. Finally, he nodded once, a gesture of pragmatic acceptance rather than surrender. "How do we proceed?" "You'll follow us to a secure room," Olivia explained. "We'll document your identity, record your statement, and contact your government. By morning, this will be resolved one way or another." As they led Sokolov through a secure corridor, Bypassing the main reception hall, Olivia felt a complex mix of emotions. This wasn't the dramatic pursuit and capture she'd experienced in her ICC days. It was something more nuanced, justice balanced with diplomatic necessity, the removal of a war criminal without disrupting the peace process that might prevent future atrocities. Her father would have approved. Eduardo had always taught her that the best operations were the ones the world never knew about, the ones that achieved justice without creating new conflicts in the process. By morning, the situation had resolved exactly as Olivia had planned. Sokolov's government, presented with irrefutable evidence of his true identity, chose to save face by discovering his deception themselves. They publicly denounced him, stripped his diplomatic credentials, and handed him over to international authorities. The peace talks continued without disruption, perhaps even strengthened by the show of good faith. Director Larson called Olivia to his office the following afternoon. "Impressive work," he said without preamble. "Clean, discreet, effective. You managed to remove a war criminal from diplomatic circulation without creating an international incident." "Thank you, sir. Your father would have been proud." This is exactly the kind of operation he was known for. Precision justice that serves the greater good. Olivia felt a moment of genuine pride. Not because she'd lived up to Eduardo's legacy, but because she'd found her own way to serve justice. One that balanced her investigative skills with the diplomatic sensitivity her current position required. "There's something else," Larson continued. "The International Criminal Court has formally requested your assistance in identifying other potential war criminals who may be operating under false identities in diplomatic circles. Not as a return to active service, but as a consultant working from here." Olivia considered the request. 6 months ago, she would have refused immediately, afraid of being pulled back into her former life. But now, she understood that she didn't have to choose between being her father's daughter and being herself. She could honor his legacy while creating her own path. "I'd be interested, sir, as long as I can maintain my current position here." "Of course. We've built something valuable with your security protocols. I wouldn't want to lose that." As Olivia left Larson's office, she found herself walking with a confidence she hadn't felt in years. The compound no longer felt like a hiding place, but a platform from which she could serve justice in her own way, quieter than her ICC days, more nuanced than her father's operations, but no less important. That evening, Olivia received an unexpected visitor at her apartment. Chief Vasquez stood at her door, his expression uncomfortable but determined. "May I come in?" quote, he asked. Olivia hesitated, then stepped aside. Briefly. Vasquez entered, standing awkwardly in her living room, taking in the now visible case files and investigation equipment that Olivia no longer felt the need to hide. "I thought you were being transferred," she said. "I am. I leave tomorrow for the UN mission in Cyprus." Vasquez took a deep breath. "I came to apologize. I was wrong about you. Wrong about a lot of things." Olivia studied him, noting the genuine discomfort in his posture, the effort it took for him to meet her eyes. "Why the harassment? What did I ever do to deserve that?" Vasquez looked away. "It wasn't about you, not really. It was about feeling threatened. I spent 15 years building my reputation in security, and then you arrived and seemed to understand protocols better than my own team within weeks. I couldn't figure out how, so I decided you must be hiding something." "I was. Yes, but not what I thought." Vasquez met her eyes. "I've heard about what you did yesterday. The war criminal extraction. Clean, professional, no diplomatic fallout. It's what your father would have done." "How would you know what my father would have done?" "Because I studied his operations when I was in training. Eduardo, El Cazador, Mendez was required reading for anyone serious about international security. His methods were legendary. Precise, ethical, effective." Vasquez shook his head. "If I'd known you were his daughter from the beginning, you would have, what? Treated me with respect? Judged me on my own merits rather than assuming I didn't belong?" Olivia's voice was quiet but firm. "That's the problem, Vasquez. Whether I was just an administrative assistant, or Eduardo Mendez's daughter shouldn't have determined how you treated me." Vasquez had the grace to look ashamed. You're right. And that's the real reason I came. Not just to apologize, but to thank you. Thank me? For what? For the lesson. I'm being sent to Cyprus to rebuild my career, to prove I can be better than I was here. I won't forget what I learned from you. That competence doesn't always look like what we expect, and that sometimes the most capable people are the ones we've been overlooking. After Vasquez left, Olivia sat on her balcony overlooking Lake Geneva, thinking about how much had changed in such a short time. She'd gone from hiding her abilities to embracing them, from fearing her father's legacy to building on it in her own way. Her phone rang, a secure line she'd recently established for her ICC consulting work. Mendez. Investigator Mendez, this is Prosecutor Keller from the ICC. We've been reviewing your Sokolov identification and extraction. Impressive work. Thank you, sir. We have another situation developing. Possible war criminal from the Congo, operating under diplomatic cover in Vienna. Would you be willing to consult? Olivia looked at her father's watch, then at the case files she'd been organizing for her new consulting role. Send me the details. I'll start reviewing tonight. 3 years after hiding her true identity, Olivia Mendez had found her balance, honoring her father's legacy while forging her own path, using her investigative skills without sacrificing the diplomatic sensitivity her position required. She was no longer running from who she was. The tourist was gone. In her place stood Olivia Mendez, daughter of El Cazador, consultant to the ICC, an architect of a new approach to international justice, one that balanced precision with compassion, strength with wisdom, just as her father had taught her. 6 months after the Sokolov extraction, Olivia stood before an audience of international security personnel from around the world. The United Nations Security Conference was the most prestigious gathering in the field, and Olivia had been invited as the keynote speaker to discuss her revolutionary verification protocols. Precision in security, Olivia told the assembled diplomats, intelligence officers, and peacekeepers, isn't just about technical skill. It's about making the right decision at the right moment, under conditions where there's no room for error. It's about understanding that every action has consequences, and those consequences ripple far beyond the immediate moment. In the audience, she could see faces that had become familiar over the past few months. Colleagues from her diplomatic security office, professionals who'd implemented her protocols, representatives whose missions had been protected by techniques she'd developed. Her work had spread far beyond the Geneva compound, creating a network of security professionals united by shared standards of excellence and ethics. After her presentation, Olivia was approached by Ambassador Helena Morales, the conference organizer. Olivia, that was extraordinary. The response has been overwhelming. We've had requests from 15 different missions asking about implementing your protocols. I'm glad the work is making a difference. It's more than that. You've fundamentally changed how we think about diplomatic security. The integration of investigative techniques with verification procedures. The emphasis on ethical decision-making under pressure. It's revolutionary. Olivia smiled, thinking about her father's lessons, about the precision he'd drilled into her through years of training. I had a good teacher. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. That evening at the conference dinner, Olivia found herself at a table with security leaders from around the world. The conversation was animated, technical, focused on the kind of challenges that had defined her career. She was no longer Eduardo Mendez's daughter trying to escape his legacy. She was Olivia Mendez, recognized in her own right as one of the leading experts in diplomatic security and covert identification. Ms. Mendez, said General Kapoor from the UN Peacekeeping Division, I wanted to ask about your transition from ICC investigator to security consultant. What drove you to pursue this path? Olivia considered the question, thinking about the journey that had brought her here. I lost my father 3 years ago. He was an intelligence officer, a covert operative, someone who dedicated his life to bringing criminals to justice through precision and service. After he died, I struggled with how to honor his memory while finding my own path. She paused, looking around the table at faces that showed understanding rather than mere curiosity. These were people who'd faced similar challenges, who understood the weight of legacy and the difficulty of building something new while honoring the past. I realized that the precision he taught me, the attention to detail, the calm under pressure, the commitment to justice. Those qualities could serve international cooperation as well as criminal pursuit, maybe better. And the investigation skills? They're just as valuable in preventing security breaches as they are in catching criminals after the fact. And the extraction operations? Kapoor asked. The stories about your identification methods? Olivia had learned to handle these questions with grace. My father taught me many things. Identification was just one of them. The principles are the same, whether you're identifying a war criminal in a diplomatic reception or verifying security credentials for a peace mission. Precision, preparation, understanding the consequences of your actions. The conversation moved on to technical topics, but Olivia found herself reflecting on how much had changed since that morning at the UN compound when she'd first revealed her true capabilities. She'd spent years running from her abilities, then learning to embrace them, and finally understanding how to use them in service of something larger than herself. Her phone buzzed with a text from Fernandez. Saw the conference coverage online. Your father would be proud. Olivia smiled and typed back, he taught me to serve justice. I just chose a different approach. The next morning, Olivia flew back to Geneva, where her office was filled with requests for consultation, invitations to speak, and updates from the security teams she'd trained, who were now serving at diplomatic missions around the world. Her protocols were being used by UN operations on 4 continents, and security breaches were dropping dramatically wherever her techniques were implemented. But the most satisfying part of her day was her ongoing ICC consultation work, reviewing case files, identifying potential suspects, providing analysis that helped bring war criminals to justice without ever leaving her office. Olivia had built something that would outlast her, a legacy of precision applied to international cooperation rather than just criminal pursuit. Director Larson stopped by in the afternoon with news. Olivia, I just got word from New York. You're being awarded the United Nations Distinguished Service Medal. It's recognition for your contributions to diplomatic security and your role in the peaceful resolution of the Sokolov situation. Quote, Olivia felt a complex mix of emotions, pride, satisfaction, and something that might have been closure. Thank you, sir. That means a great deal. There's something else. They want you to consider a position at UN headquarters, leading the entire diplomatic security division. It would mean leaving Geneva, but the impact you could have. Olivia looked out her office window at the compound where her journey had begun, where she'd learned to stop hiding from who she was and start building on it instead. Can I think about it? Of course. But Olivia, whatever you decide, know that you've already accomplished something extraordinary here. You've honored your father's legacy while creating your own. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. That evening, Olivia sat in her apartment with her father's case files spread around her. She had taken them out, not to study them or maintain them, but simply to remember. The files were exactly as Eduardo had left them, perfectly organized, meticulously detailed, tools designed for one purpose, but capable of teaching lessons that extended far beyond their intended use. Olivia opened the letter her father had written, the one she'd read hundreds of times but never stopped learning from. Justicia con precision, compasión con fuerza. That's what I taught you. That's who you are. She understood now what he had been trying to tell her. It wasn't about rejecting her abilities or embracing them completely. It was about choosing how to use them, what purpose they would serve, what kind of legacy they would create. Olivia had made her choice. She would accept the New York position, continue developing security protocols, and maintain her ICC consulting role. She would honor her father's memory not by becoming him, but by becoming the best version of herself. The tourist was gone, replaced by someone who commanded respect through competence and compassion. The hidden investigator had become a security architect. The covert operative's daughter had become a teacher, and precision had found its truest purpose in the service of international cooperation, rather than just criminal pursuit. Olivia Mendez had finally come home to who she was meant to be. Outside her window, the lights of Geneva glowed in the darkness, and somewhere in the city, diplomatic missions were operating under the security protocols she'd developed, preventing conflicts before they could begin, with the precision her father had taught her and the diplomatic sensitivity she'd discovered for herself. The legacy continued, transformed but unbroken. Eduardo Mendez had taught his daughter to be a hunter. Olivia Mendez had chosen to be a guardian instead. Both decisions required precision. Both served something larger than themselves. Both honored the responsibility that came with extraordinary skill. The difference was in the choice of approach, and Olivia had chosen prevention over pursuit, cooperation over confrontation, foresight over reaction. She'd aimed true and hit exactly what she was meant to hit. Her father would have been proud. 3 years after accepting the New York position, Olivia stood at the podium of the United Nations General Assembly. Before her sat representatives from 193 nations, gathered to ratify a new international security protocol that bore her name, the Mendez Framework for Diplomatic Protection and Verification. Distinguished delegates, Olivia began, this framework represents more than just improved security procedures. It embodies a fundamental shift in how we approach international cooperation, prioritizing prevention over reaction, verification over suspicion, and collaboration over confrontation. As she spoke, Olivia could see the impact of her work throughout the chamber. Security officers trained under her protocols stood at strategic positions. Verification experts she'd mentored checked credentials with quiet efficiency, and diplomatic security personnel from dozens of nations who'd implemented her methods watched with professional appreciation. What we signed today, she continued, is not merely a procedural document. It is a commitment to a more secure world, one where diplomatic missions can operate without fear, where peace negotiations can proceed without disruption, and where those who would abuse diplomatic privilege to escape justice find no haven within our international community. After the framework was ratified by unanimous vote, Secretary General Torres approached Olivia with a warm smile. Extraordinary achievement, Director Mendez. This will transform diplomatic security for decades to come. Thank you, sir. It's been a collaborative effort, perhaps, but it wouldn't have happened without your vision. Torres studied her for a moment. Your father was known as El Cazador, the hunter. What would he think of his daughter becoming known as La Guardiana, the guardian? Olivia smiled, genuinely touched by the comparison. I think he'd say we were serving the same cause, just from different angles. Later that evening, Olivia hosted a small reception for her team in her Manhattan apartment. Among the guests was Deputy Director Fernandez, now Ambassador Fernandez, representing Spain at the United Nations. To the Mendez Framework, Fernandez toasted, raising her glass. And to Olivia, who taught us all that security doesn't have to come at the expense of diplomacy. As conversations flowed around her, Olivia stepped onto her balcony overlooking the East River. The lights of the United Nations headquarters gleamed nearby, a symbol of the international cooperation she'd dedicated her career to protecting. You'd like the view, Dad, she said softly to the night air. He would, came a voice behind her. Olivia turned to find Helena Morales, now her deputy director, joining her on the balcony. You knew my father? Olivia asked, surprised. I worked with Spanish intelligence liaison in my early career, Helena explained. I met Eduardo once, briefly, during an operation in Morocco. He spoke about you, you know. About his brilliant daughter who understood people as well as she understood tactical operations. He predicted you'd surpass him someday. Olivia felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the evening breeze. He never told me that. Men like your father rarely say such things directly. But he knew, and he would be immensely proud of what you've built here. Helena gestured toward the UN building. Eduardo hunted those who had already committed crimes. You've created systems that prevent crimes from happening in the first place. Both are necessary. Both serve justice. But what you've done may ultimately save more lives. As Helena returned to the party, Olivia remained on the balcony, contemplating how far she'd come from that quiet administrative assistant hiding her skills at the Geneva compound. The journey hadn't been easy, from the confrontation with Vasquez to the Sokolov extraction to building an entirely new security framework, but each step had brought her closer to the person she was meant to be. Her phone buzzed with a secure message. A potential security breach at the Syrian peace talks in Vienna, a diplomatic credential that didn't match verification protocols, possibly another war criminal attempting to infiltrate the negotiations. Her team was requesting guidance. 5 years ago, Olivia would have seen this as a return to her hunting days, a pursuit that would pull her back into her father's world. Now she recognized it as exactly where she belonged, at the intersection of security and diplomacy, using her investigative skills to protect the processes that built peace. She quickly composed a response, setting the verification protocols in motion, dispatching the right team members, establishing the secure communications channels. The precision her father had taught her applied to protection rather than pursuit. As Olivia returned to her guests, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had found her true calling. Not as Eduardo's daughter, though she would always be proud of that connection. Not as a former ICC investigator, though those skills remained invaluable. But as Olivia Mendez, architect of a new approach to international security, guardian of diplomatic processes, protector of the fragile mechanisms of peace. The tourist had become the guardian, the hunter's daughter had become the architect, and precision had found its perfect purpose in her hands. The next morning, Olivia visited her father's grave at the Spanish Diplomatic Cemetery in New York. She hadn't been there since the funeral, finding it too painful to confront the physical reminder of his absence. But today felt different. Not an ending, but a continuation. Not grief, but gratitude. She placed white lilies on his headstone, running her fingers over the simple inscription. General Eduardo Mendez, served with honor, loved with devotion. Gracias, Papa, she said softly, for everything you taught me, for the precision and the purpose, for showing me what it means to serve something larger than yourself. A light snow began to fall, dusting her shoulders as she stood in quiet reflection. Eduardo had given her the skills to hunt criminals, but he'd also given her something more valuable, the wisdom to choose her own path, to apply those skills where they could do the most good. As Olivia walked back through the cemetery gates, she felt a sense of completeness she hadn't experienced since before her father's death. The path ahead was clear now, not because it followed Eduardo's footsteps, but because it honored the principles that had guided them both. Justice served with precision, strength tempered with compassion. Her phone rang. Director Larson, now her colleague in the diplomatic security community. The Mendez Framework Protocols just prevented a major security breach at the nuclear non-proliferation talks in Geneva. Your team performed flawlessly. That's good to hear, Olivia replied, watching the snow begin to accumulate on the New York sidewalks. Any details I should know? The usual. Forged credentials, altered identity documents, someone trying to access sensitive negotiations. But your verification protocols caught the discrepancies immediately. No disruption to the talks, no diplomatic incident, just quiet efficiency. Eduardo would have called it a perfect operation. Olivia smiled at the mention of her father. He would have, but he'd also remind us that the real test is consistency. Can we maintain that level of security across all diplomatic missions every day without fail? That's why we need you, Olivia. You've got his attention to detail, but your own vision for how to implement it systematically. After hanging up, Olivia walked through Central Park, watching families enjoying the first snow of the season. Children building snowmen, couples walking hand in hand, ordinary people living peaceful lives, unaware of the diplomatic security systems that helped maintain the international stability they took for granted. This was why her work mattered. Not for recognition or accolades, but for moments like these, people living without fear because systems were in place to protect the fragile mechanisms of peace. Eduardo had understood this, had dedicated his life to it from his angle as a hunter of those who threatened that peace. Olivia continued the mission from her angle as a guardian of the processes that built it. Different approaches, same ultimate purpose. The hunter and the guardian, father and daughter, linked by precision and dedication to something larger than themselves. As she reached the other side of the park, Olivia looked toward the United Nations headquarters where her team was already implementing the day's security protocols. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, more verification procedures to refine, more security systems to enhance, more diplomatic missions to protect. The work was never finished, the mission never complete. But Olivia Mendez was ready, no longer hiding who she was, no longer running from her father's legacy. She had found her own path, one that honored everything Eduardo had taught her while creating something uniquely her own. The quiet strength, the methodical precision, the unwavering commitment to justice, these were her inheritance, and she had found the perfect way to use them. The tourist had become the guardian, and the world was safer for it. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.